Okay, so picture this. We are all hanging out, maybe grabbing some coffee, and I ask you to name the first thing that pops into your head when you think of Paris. I bet like 99% of you would say the Eiffel Tower, right? It is on postcards, it is in every movie set in France, and it is basically the global symbol for romance and adventure. It is this massive, sparkly iron icon that seems like it has been there forever, like it grew out of the ground along with the city itself. But what if I told you that the whole thing was almost torn down and sold for scrap metal? Seriously, it is one of those wild history stories that sounds completely made up, but it is totally true. The city of Paris was just a few pen strokes away from dismantling its most famous landmark. This isn't just some little historical footnote. It was a huge, dramatic debate that had the whole city buzzing. So let's rewind the clock a bit. The year is 1889, and Paris is getting ready to throw the party of the century, the Exposition Universelle, or the World's Fair. These fairs were a massive deal back then, kind of like the Olympics and a giant tech conference all rolled into one. Countries would come to show off their latest inventions and cultural treasures. So, they held a competition for a design, and a brilliant engineer named Gustave Eiffel came forward with his mind-blowing proposal for a gigantic iron lattice tower. The crazy thing is, from the very beginning, the tower was never meant to be a permanent part of the Paris skyline. The official contract that Gustave Eiffel signed was for a permit that lasted only 20 years. Think about that for a second. He and his team spent over 2 years assembling 18,038 pieces of wrought iron, held together by 2.5 million rivets, all for something that was scheduled to be torn down in 1909. You would think that building the tallest structure in the world would get you a round of applause. But in Paris, it got Gustave Eiffel a whole lot of hate mail. Seriously, the public opinion against the tower was fierce, especially from the city's artistic and literary elite. They were absolutely horrified by the idea of this monstrous metal skeleton looming over their beautiful, romantic city. They did not see innovation. They saw an industrial smokestack that had no place among the elegant architecture of Paris. Before the tower was even finished, a group of about 300 prominent artists, writers, and composers formed a group called the Committee of 300 to protest its construction. These were not just random angry citizens. We are talking about big names, like the writer Guy de Maupassant and the composer Charles Gounod. They co-signed a petition that was published in a major newspaper, and they did not hold back. They called the tower a truly tragic street lamp, a gigantic black smokestack, and a barbarous mass that would crush all the other beautiful monuments like a dark and hideous blot of ink. The story goes that the writer Guy de Maupassant hated the tower so much that he often ate lunch at the restaurant on its first level. When someone asked him why he would choose to eat inside the very thing he despised, he supposedly replied that it was the only place in all of Paris where he couldn't see it. That is some next-level commitment to your dislike right there. Just when it seemed like the tower was destined for the scrapyard, its creator stepped into the ring to fight for its life. Gustave Eiffel was not just an engineer who built a thing and moved on. He was deeply, personally invested in his creation. He had poured his heart, his reputation, and a significant amount of his own money into this project. He truly believed it was more than just a temporary fairground attraction. He saw it as a symbol of French ingenuity and modern engineering, a monument that represented the future, not just the past. So when the calls for its demolition grew louder, Eiffel refused to stand by and watch his masterpiece be torn apart. Eiffel was a brilliant man, not just as an engineer but as a strategist. He knew he could not win the fight on aesthetic grounds. The artists had already made up their minds, and you cannot really argue with someone about what they find beautiful or ugly. So, instead of fighting about art, he decided to change the conversation entirely. He needed to prove that the tower had a value that went far beyond its appearance. He needed to make it so indispensable to Paris that tearing it down would be not just a shame, but a stupid, impractical decision. Gustave Eiffel's big idea was simple but brilliant. Turn the tower into a giant open-air science lab. He argued that its incredible height, which made it the tallest man-made structure in the world at the time, standing 330 meters, or 1,083 feet tall, the Eiffel Tower was the first man-made structure that was taller than the Great Pyramid of Giza, by more than twice its height. Gustave offered a unique platform for all sorts of scientific research that was impossible to conduct anywhere else. He was not just making vague suggestions, he came up with a concrete plan. He proposed that the tower could be used as a premier meteorological station. Scientists could install barometers, anemometers, and thermometers at various levels to study wind speed, air pressure, and temperature changes at different altitudes. He reached out to the scientific community and invited them to use his tower for their experiments. He personally financed the installation of a small laboratory on the third level, complete with all the necessary equipment. He encouraged astronomers to use the tower's stable, high-altitude platform to make observations of the cosmos, far above the dust and haze of the city streets. He even installed a Foucault pendulum, a massive swinging weight, to provide a dramatic and public demonstration of the Earth's rotation. He was actively turning the tower into a hub of scientific discovery and public education. He showed how the information on wind resistance gathered from the tower could be vital for the brand new field of aviation. Early aviators and airplane designers, like the Wright brothers, actually used data from Eiffel's experiments to help them understand aerodynamics. Suddenly, the tower was not just a pretty or ugly structure, it was contributing to the cutting edge of modern technology. Just as the scientific experiments were starting to prove the tower's worth, a brand new technology emerged that would seal its fate for good: the radio. In the late 1890s and early 1900s, scientists were just beginning to figure out how to send messages through the air using electromagnetic waves. It was a revolutionary concept, but they had a major problem. To send a signal over a long distance, you needed a very, very tall antenna. And as it happened, Paris had a 300-meter-tall, ready-made iron antenna just sitting there, waiting for a job. It was a match made in technological heaven. Gustave Eiffel, always quick to spot an opportunity, immediately saw the potential. He enthusiastically offered his tower as a platform for radio experiments. In 1898, the first successful radio transmission in France was sent from the top of the Eiffel Tower to the Pantheon, a distance of about 4 kilometers. It was a huge breakthrough. The French military, in particular, perked up its ears. They instantly recognized the strategic importance of long-distance wireless communication. Being able to send coded messages to troops in the field or to ships at sea without relying on vulnerable telegraph cables was a massive military advantage. The tower quickly became the heart of France's burgeoning radio telegraphy network. In 1903, just 6 years before the demolition deadline, Eiffel convinced the military to install a permanent radio antenna on the tower. This was the masterstroke. The tower was no longer just a lab for civilian science, it was now a critical asset for national defense. So in the end, it was not the beauty of the tower or the millions of tourists that saved it from being turned into a pile of scrap. It was its voice. By becoming the most important radio antenna in France, the tower literally learned how to talk, sending messages across the country and over the seas. This new ability made it absolutely indispensable. The very thing that the artists had called a barbarous mass became a sophisticated instrument of communication, connecting Paris to the rest of the world in a way no one had ever imagined. It was the ultimate plot twist in the tower's dramatic story. The city of Paris officially renewed the tower's permit in 1909, and from that point on, its place in the city was secure. But something else amazing happened along the way. As the years went by, public perception began to change. People got used to seeing the tower on their skyline. A new generation grew up with it, and they did not see a monstrous smokestack. They saw a familiar and comforting landmark. It slowly worked its way into the heart of Parisian culture. The tower that was once hated became loved. It is kind of funny how things work out. The tower's practical uses saved it long enough for people to finally appreciate its artistic merit. The same radical, modern design that had horrified the traditionalists in 1889 eventually came to be seen as elegant, daring, and beautiful. It became a muse for new artists like Robert Delaunay and Marc Chagall, who celebrated its geometric grace in their paintings. So the next time you see a picture of the Eiffel Tower, all lit up and sparkling at night, remember the story of its narrow escape. It is not just a tall, pretty thing to look at. It is a survivor. It is a testament to one man's stubborn belief in his creation and the unexpected power of science to change our minds. It is a tower that had to fight for its life by becoming a laboratory and a radio host. And in doing so, it transformed from a temporary spectacle into an eternal symbol of Paris. It had to prove it was useful before we could all agree it was beautiful.
Thank you for watching. Hope you found this video informative and entertaining. Please subscribe, like, share, and comment. We do like to know and hear your feedback. And if you have the means, please consider supporting us on Patreon, where you can get early access to our videos and where we post bonus material. Till next time, this is Geeky Tidbits saying cheers and have a good day.